Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started. I just want to start by sharing a little bit about some expectations while we're on Zoom. So the very first thing is if I could have everyone mute yourself. There's a couple people unmuted who are helping out lead the presentation. So if you're not quite sure, have questions.
Go down to the bottom left corner and there's a little microphone. If you click on that, that will mute you.
I also have the ability to mute you, so don't be offended if I go in and mute you, but I'm just trying to make sure that our audio is working properly so that everyone can have the best experience. So hi, my name is Beth Reed, and yes, I'm the official host right now of the meeting, but a few of us from the mission committee are really pleased to have you here, and Henry and the pastors, of course. So a couple other just basics about how we're going to run the meeting. First of all, I am recording this. So that means, you know, your name is displayed. It might show up at different times if you're asking a question or whatever, but mostly just the speaker will be on display. And the other thing is that if you would like to ask questions during the presentation, during the time, there is a way for you to ask questions in the chat. So if you click on the little chat button at the bottom of your screen, you can type in a question to everyone, or you can type it individually to me. So my name is Beth Reed, and then that way I can bring up a question at an appropriate pause time, but there will also be some times where Laura will pause and invite you to chime in with a question verbally. If you need any help with tech or whatever, feel free to message me, or, you know, some of us are more experienced and some are newer to this format, and so we'll have lots of grace for each other. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome. So I'm going to give the reins to Chris to introduce our speaker tonight.
Thanks, Beth. I'm also really glad that all of you have decided to attend. I'm assuming that because you're here, you agree with me that homelessness is an important issue for us to be discussing as a group at Bidwell, and maybe you just want more information. You maybe have a friend, or you know someone who's homeless, or you just feel like you see that same person over and over again, and you almost feel like you should know them, and you want to do something to help them. Maybe you don't want to do something to help them, they irritate you, but you want more information. I know homelessness is a very complicated issue, and there's a lot of controversy surrounding it right now in Chico. So but I feel like as a downtown church, Bidwell really needs to embrace this issue, and we need to engage with the Jesus Center, because the Jesus Center is really good at this, and become a part of the solution for this complicated issue. And hopefully you feel the same. So the goal of this class is to provide you with some context and some information regarding the reasons why people are homeless, and you know, what the issues are regarding this population, and some of the strategies for helping them to you know, bring themselves out of homelessness. So with that in mind, I'm proud to introduce my friend Laura Cootsona. She's lots of us know her. She's been the director at the Jesus Center for 4.5 years. But many of us know her because she and her husband Greg and their daughters Melanie and Lizzie attended Bidwell for years while Greg was the associate pastor. And so their daughters are grown up now, and they are at a different church, because that's how it works in Presbyterian churches. But still, we feel like she's a part of our congregation, our church family. She describes herself as a teacher at heart who loves gathering and sharing information to help people think differently about difficult topics. Laura has a heart for the poor and those in need, and she also has an amazing ability to collaborate and bring different groups together to work together towards a solution. And I've never seen that as clear as I've seen in the way she's been working to expand Jesus Center's services, but also to get this Renewal Center going, which I think she'll be talking about later on tonight. And so with that, I think I'll just hand it over to Laura to take over the class.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Beth. It's really great to be here. Greg predicted that we would have a big crowd. He's done a couple of classes on Sunday nights, and I know it's about to rain and pour and thunder outside, so it's nice to be cozy in here talking to y'all. Lots of fun, familiar faces, so thanks for coming out. The question really is, who is our neighbor? And as we look at this class together, as we look at this issue, this really is the core issue. And at its core, it really is a theological issue. And I'm going to turn my slide. There we go. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of verses in our scriptures about the poor. But in short, and this is one good example of that from Proverbs, whoever oppresses the poor shows contempt for their maker, for whoever is kind to the needy honors God. I think if at its core, if we can start here, I think we can have lots and lots of conversations about how we can respond to the poor and what we should do. But at its core, the question is, what does God think of the poor? What does God think of the suffering? What does God think of the outcast? And I want to invite you into as much reflection as you can muster around this topic. As you read the scriptures, bring these questions to bear. What do we know about God's love for the poor from the scriptures? How is it that God reaches out to those on the outside? What does it look like for God to do this? And what does it show us about God's heart? And ultimately, what do we learn from Jesus's example? I wrote a short piece in my reflection time this morning about how infinite God's love is for his people. That when we look at Jesus, there's no formula. So we know that we're not going to find this one small path that we're going to run down and it's going to tell us what to do in response to the poor. So if you think that's what we're doing tonight, you're definitely in the wrong Zoom room. That's not how Jesus works. So it's an adventure for sure. I wanted to just give you a chance just to play with your keyboard for a minute and ask you one very simple question, and I'm going to make sure I can see the chat as well, which is, when you hear the word homeless, what is the first word that comes to mind? And I'd love it if you were able to share that with everyone, and just, there's no right answer, just fill that chat screen with one word. Poor, hurting, sad, lonely, poverty, lost, desperate, miserable, without, pain, they're good words, hopeless, sadness, it's not supposed to be this way, tired, vulnerable, mental illness, new normal, suffering, broken, hard to understand, confusing. Well, thanks, you guys. Those are good words, and feel free to keep adding. I think if we save the chat, it might be a interesting thing to bring those words together in sort of a picture. I remember when we did this in an Agros training at Bidwell some years ago around the word poor. And there are positive words, there are what we might see negative words or confusing words. It is a very big group of people, and who we call the poor, are we, who we call the poor, and we're all experience poverty in different ways and brokenness in different ways. And so as we look at homelessness in our own backyard, keep in mind that we're not ever going to be talking about a single group. It is always multiple groups or multiple individuals who, yes, they might have this one thing in common, but they don't have enough to live on their own, or they cannot make it so that they can have a home. But other than that, they are as diverse as those of us we call housed. Okay. So I thought I'd give a quick snapshot about California homelessness. Keep in mind that this is truly a moving target. As I read in the paper this morning, these numbers, which are about 134,000 out of the 500,000 in the United States, 134,000 live in the state of California. 25% of our national homeless are here in the state of California. I read in the paper that post-pandemic, they're projecting an additional 30,000 people in the state of California and a 45% increase nationwide. If that's not sobering, this pandemic is clearly not just a health crisis. These are some of the figures that emerged in the single point in time count on in March of 2019. Our county, along with most counties in the United States, does a one-day, 24-hour count of homelessness every 2 years. Our next one will be in January, and if I'll just make a plug for if you're interested in volunteering and understanding homelessness, volunteer to be part of that 24-hour count. It's a fascinating experience to be a part of that, and it comes with training and all sorts of interesting opportunities. There were 2,300 countywide in that count. That includes sheltered, unsheltered, and in this case, if you know your dates, that's post-campfire. So that also includes almost 1,000 that were sheltered with FEMA support. 891 countywide were unsheltered in that count, and 420 were in traditional sheltering, like the Tourist Shelter, the Jesus Center, and the Rescue Mission in Oroville. I'm not a big fan, I'll just be honest, with this set of numbers. I think it's cluttered with the FEMA housed homeless. I think it is an undercount. It compares at total numbers as an increase from 2017. Our countywide numbers were 1,983 in 2017, but I think it's a gross undercount if you take out those FEMA numbers of almost 1,000 people. So it is what it is. It was a crazy year, and it was somewhat of a miracle that we got the count done at all. And there were some real deficits. One deficit, for example, is this doesn't include families who experience lack of shelter according to our Butte County Office of Ed. That could be thousands each year children who experience homelessness in any given year. But if they weren't homeless on this day, they were not counted. The problem is real. The problem is increasing, and post-campfire, we still have almost 1,000 open cases that with folks who are yet to find permanent housing, and many, many people on the waiting list. If you want your resident specialist on that, that is Tracy Davis, your very own. A number that is, I think, important for Chico is we have approximately 400 unsheltered people in Chico, according to this count. That could be up or down about 50. Right now in shelters, we have probably about 180 in Chico sheltered in our traditional shelters, and we have 130 in the hotel program that's run through the state called Project Room Key. And that's just here in Chico. This is the slide probably with the most dense information, because I think the question really is, how do people end up being in this situation? But usually it doesn't start as a question. Usually it starts as an assumption. And so in my introduction, Chris said, I like making complicated, bringing complicated problems and helping people understand them. Honestly, with this slide and with this content, I'm actually trying to complicate the problem for you. I think what we tend to do is we try to simplify it because it helps us feel like we can understand and control the issue. And so we say, well, that person looks like they're employable. Why doesn't he get a job? Or that person looks like they shouldn't, they're just causing trouble. They shouldn't be unhoused. They should be housed. They're screaming and yelling. They're disrupting my breakfast in some open cafe. We want to think that that's volitional. So those can be true, but often what's happening underneath the surface is a lot more than what meets the eye. And I recently have been using an example of a friend of mine who is my same age. If she were sharing the screen with me, we would look both like successful white women, or at least competent, housed, healthy white women. And yet, as we share each other's story, it's a minor miracle that she's even alive today. And my story is not that story. And her stories before she was even 18 of abuse are so endless that she stops mid-sentence as she begins to tell me about those issues. So we need to be very careful, and particularly as people of faith, that we look at a human and look inquisitively and curiously at that person, and really seek to have God's eyes as we look and try to understand someone's predicament and issues. I think this is really where we need to decide as people of faith whether we're going to look at this problem as an inconvenience and merely as one part of the problem, whether that's economic or it's healthcare or it's prison reform or it's addiction, and whether we're going to try to understand it with the complexity that our God does when he looks out at a human being and sees into our very souls and understands the complexity of the journey we're on. And I think what's most troubling to me and what's really pushed me to work with churches more is I think we have a compelling reason and a compelling need to respond to God and out of God's love to the people in our midst that are struggling. And what I'm afraid I'm seeing more and more in the pews is the same kind of disgust and othering of people that we see out in the mainstream. And I think we, on this issue particularly, need to seek God's eyes and God's frame and God's way of looking at it. Again, that doesn't simplify it. That makes it more complicated. But I still think that that's our call. And I think it's also part of how we will witness and really love folks in a way that will set us apart in our community. So on the left side of my screen, I think it's probably the same on yours, are the external things that we think of as causes for homelessness. Obviously, losing a job is a huge issue, and certainly the one that we are facing in spades right now. The accompanying component to that is housing unaffordability. And if you're wondering why the numbers are so high in California, it's not because it's always nice weather. It's because the housing is terribly unaffordable. Based on median incomes, our county is one of the worst. And those numbers were true before the fire. Now it's not only unaffordability, but it's also availability. Health crisis is the #1 reason for bankruptcy in this country. Prison reform has created early release and release of folks who would have normally been incarcerated for the same crime are now being released because they're misdemeanors. And these different reforms that we as voters voted for have created a particular subcomponent to those who are homeless. And whether you have a record or not, it's very, very difficult to get a job or housing if you have gone through the justice system. When you asked on the point in time count, what's the reason why you're homeless? The #1 reason falls under the category of family crisis. Family crisis includes divorce. It includes abuse. It includes any crisis that is family related. And it could be an elderly parent who needs assistance that you have to leave your job for. It could be a sick or disabled child that requires more work or more money. These are all reasons people fall into the homelessness and that cycle of not being able to get housed. I've recently added natural disaster. And I don't know if the pandemic goes under health crisis, natural disaster, economic disaster, or just all around craziness. But these are all components to destabilizing folks. And oftentimes what happens is it's people who are already on the edge. And that's where I'm going to move into the internal. But I think our experience, and I don't know who else is on the call that's been as involved as Tracy and I in the long-term recovery post-fire, but that situation has revealed deep vulnerabilities that I used to see only on paper in statistics about Butte County. But what we saw when that fire rolled through the ridge is an incredible amount of vulnerability, cognitive disabilities, very thin margins when it came to economic, income versus expenses, but way below market housing that will be replaced. These are all what we have determined to be vulnerabilities. And then of course, disruption in the house, disabled children, disabled parents, all those kinds of things. So that's all external. What we don't see, and maybe we don't even hear about, are the three aspects of internal. And I think what's different now than maybe the folks we might have seen at the Jesus Center or the Torah Shelter 20 years ago is the combination of these internal factors that show up in an entangled mesh that is very difficult to break through. And it's not a meal, a prayer, and a hug any longer that's going to get them from A to B to B to C. These are deeply entrenched issues that either existed before the homelessness or were manifested in more with more vengeance once someone became homeless or jobless or has chronic pain or one of these other external crises. So the first is ACEs, or trauma and during your childhood years. If you aren't familiar with the ACEs score, it stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it includes everything from abuse, verbal, physical, and psychological, to neglect, to household dysfunction, things like imprisonment of a parent, separation of a parent, drug use of a parent, any of those kinds of factors. And there are only 10 factors in this rubric, but if you have experienced 4 or more of these, it exponentially leads you to an adult manifestation of physical and psychological ill health. And we in Butte County, again, before the fire, before the pandemic, before post-fire, any of that, we had higher ACEs scores than the County of San Diego, the County of LA, the County of San Francisco. This has been an issue, an underlying issue in our county. And it doesn't only affect individuals. It actually, the more I understand this, it affects a community in an aggregate way. So it actually contributes to the ill health of a community. And so it's a very, very real piece. And so trauma informed schooling, trauma informed services, trauma informed interventions of all sorts have completely, and are in this moment, completely redesigning the way we manage children's dysfunction in the classroom, to how we do healthcare, to how we do child abuse cases, all of this. And so I will tell you that anecdotally, every single person who comes to the Jesus Center has experienced 4 or more ACEs. When you've gone through the foster care system, when you've been, left by a parent at some point in your 0 to 5 years and gone into the foster care system, when you've become an addict at age 11, this isn't something because you're a bad boy. This is something that happened in your environment and you're responding to it. And so oftentimes you see the onset of mental illness at points where trauma occurred or repeatedly occurred. It can also be genetically, obviously, changed from one generation to the next. And then addiction is a piece of either self-medication, escape, looking for a family that's outside your family because that unit wasn't helping you grow and thrive. So that's this mesh of trauma, mental illness, and addiction that afflict a large portion of folks who stay homeless long term, and certainly in the short term. We thought we'd pause for a minute, and Beth's gonna help me because I can't look at 3 things at once. I'm not that good. To see if there's any questions. This is a lot of, again, complex input. Love to hear your questions, thoughts, questions that you might have put in the chat. Beth, you got something for me?
Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question at this point, or you can type something into the chat. While you're doing that, I also see that Giovanni posted a report on ACEs. And so that's a really great resource. You can click on that link from the Center for Youth Wellness.org.
Beth, I'd just like to hop in there and thank Giovanni. Giovanni was actually the person who exposed me to ACEs early on when we were working at the Community Foundation. Both he and I have spent a lot of time talking and thinking about this. And recently, Giovanni has brought some experts into the community to think about and help us become a more resilient, healthier community. And one of the real hopeful parts of the newer ACEs study is actually the idea of positive interventions for change and what they call near science. And maybe Giovanni, you can post something there for fun if someone's interested in that. It's not just like a death knell. It's not something like, if you have this, then this will occur, and there's no disrupting that. Of course, we believe in a God that's all about disrupting that, but there's also neuroscience that suggests we can disrupt it, and very simple positive interferences, if you will, with that progression is actually doable, and regular humans can do it. You don't need to have a special degree to do that.
So Ray's got a question about data on homeless students from Chico State and Butte.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so and maybe I got a couple of university experts in the room too. So, but my understanding is that CSU across the state is polling folks and discovering that about 25% of the population who are students at the universities are experiencing either housing insecurity or food insecurity. And I know anecdotally through Greg's work with at the university how significant this is. And I think the pandemic has revealed another layer, which is going back home, if you will, is not always as easy as it might look. And so we have had, I know Greg's experienced that a lot in the classroom. I'm sure some of the other professors in the Zoom room have as well.
Luke's got some info.
I've worked with the folks at the Basic Needs Project at Chico State in some different things. And if you just Google CSU Chico Basic Needs, there's a lot of great information about everything from students who are food insecure to in need of places to live and those kind of things. And they do a really great job there too. And so yeah, Basic Needs at Chico State.
Yeah, and they just received a big grant to work on this, and both on the research side, but also in the provision of some of those basic needs. And there's some real superstars working on it at the university. We also are working with the university on a something we saw in Napa was a landlord mitigation program, which gives the opportunity to house people, both the traditionally homeless, if you will, as well as student homeless, who may not have the best records in terms of either income or housing, and it allows the landlords to take that risk because there's actually a financial pool that will back them up if there's ever a problem. I saw Anna's question. Yes, Chat has a house. So Chico Housing Action Team has a house that's dedicated to students. And that's one of the interventions that the community has done in conjunction with the university.
Okay, does anybody else have any other questions at this point?
Tim, you want to clarify your question? Is it the resource about the medication pool?
I posted the resource that Luke mentioned about basic needs from Chico State. Feel free to.
Tim, you want to unmute yourself? He'd like to unmute himself.
I can unmute him.
Beth's going to help you out, Tim.
I got you, Tim.
Timid.
No, I was responding to Katie's comment about 50% of the students will be back, wondering what that resource was, because I've heard anywhere from 10% to 90%.
Katie, you want to unmute yourself, or I think we might have heard it from the same source.
Oh, well, she says the university. That's a good resource.
The source I heard was from Dan Herbert, who works for the university. He did have some caveats to that. He said it was anecdotal, guesstimate, and it was based on the landlords that he works with. Oh, Megan Kurtz gave you that. So, yeah, so we heard that 50 to 60% of the students stayed in location this semester. And it sounds like Megan updated that. And Megan is that works for the president and primarily on fire-related recovery, but now a little bit of everything. So,
well, but and just driving around the student neighborhood, it didn't appear, and looking at cars parked on the street and these things, it did not look like 50 to 60% of the students came back after they started doing online classes after spring break. Now, that's very anecdotal, however you say that.
Anecdotal.
But it just, it really looked different. And from driving around at night and looking at lights on in apartment units, it didn't look like 50 or 60%.
Yeah.
But I'm pessimistic, so don't let me be in charge.
Well, as Megan Kurtz said to me a couple of days ago, let's be sure we understand that they haven't canceled the university. The students are just simply going to class online. And for some, particularly the older students, they are eager to be in the university setting even to do that. So we want them to come back for a whole host of reasons. So let's hope that they do. Okay, I'm going to move ahead. I can't see you, so I'm assuming that means a yes. I don't know why I have these red dots on my screen. But I'm going to share a quick video. Hopefully all can hear.
For a long time, I had a history of drug abuse for like 20 years. It's like 2004, and I ended up staying there for like 3 days. And I ended up using, and so I just didn't go back. And I went back to the Jesus Center. I stayed there I was there like 5 months that time, 5.5 months. And then I moved into my own place. And that was in 2005. You know, between 2005 and 2012, I bounced around a few places. You know, I'd stay a while. But I continued to use the whole time. I had lost like house after house, you know, relationship with my kids, and my 18-year-old son had just went away to prison, and I was just broken and felt hopeless when I got there. And I went to the Jesus Center, and then my life really started to change from there. When I got there, I knew that I was ready to change because days before I got there, I had already just, you know, decided that something needed to change. I've just never met people that were just so supportive and always positive, always had something uplifting, but yet hold me accountable every single day. One of the girls there started applying for jobs, and I was like, okay, you know, I'm gonna start applying too. And then I got a couple interviews, and then Walmart called me, and I went for an interview, and I got a job. And I was like, I'm gonna keep this job. When I first started, I started out as a temp, and then I went to the sales floor associate, and then I moved to be a processor, and then I got promoted to department manager. I didn't believe that I would be clean for 7 years. I don't even know if I'd be alive today. So for them, I am forever grateful and thankful that they're there, that the Jesus Center was there, and for everything they did to help me get my life straight. Everybody can learn something in every situation, and don't turn away from change, you know, because change is scary for people, and change is good, and anybody can change. I learned that because there was people that said I would never change, and that's not true. For a long
Always makes me cry every time. So just a quick update on some things that are going on at the Jesus Center. I think most of you know the basics, but we really are there as a place where we can show God's love to those who are struggling. We work with the community. We're really collaborative to offer the ability to rest, be restored, and transformed. And we offer that freely to all of God's children. Currently, we offer 2 meals daily, breakfast on Saturday and Sunday. Bidwell is back hosting a Sunday morning breakfast. We're super psyched about that. We have a resource center, which is where case management happens. We have showers, mail, lots of visiting agencies and services that come alongside us there, and a free store for clothing distribution. We have a housing program that has 7 houses, including one for mamas and babies, and including one for transitional housing for fire survivors. And our newest house, which is going to be house number 8, which is going to be called Juniper. And that is going to be a medical respite house in collaboration with Enloe Hospital. And we have vocational training throughout our work. We have a flower business, a farm. Many of you are involved in our CSA and pick up your vegetables every other week. We have kitchen programs, receptionist programming, retail training, kind of you name it. Anything that happens at the Jesus Center, we turn into a training program. I should say some of that was just a lie, because we aren't doing all of this in this very moment. Our meals are all to go. And I also didn't mention that we are, in addition to the 200 meals that we're providing daily out of our dining room, which is actually a table with to-go bags, we are also providing 450 meals a day to the hotel program. That's supposed to say, oh my gosh, that's a lot of meals. It is a lot of meals. My team is amazing. Okay, so we have a new rubric that we're playing around with, and the slide's not brilliant because I haven't created one of my own, so this is just something we've stolen off of the internet to start to play with. But people often ask, how is it that you help people? And can you help people that don't want to be helped? And rather than saying there are certain kinds of people who have certain kinds of issues that can or cannot be helped, this theory called the stages of change is something that was developed some time ago to talk about the process of recovering from addiction. But it's been retooled and used for lots of different stages of change in lots of different issues. And so we're actually in the process of layering this onto what does it look like for someone to take up the opportunities that we provide at the Jesus Center and move forward in their life to stabilize in their life. And just really simply, the only thing that's not here is I would have a red bubble, and that's someone who's just stuck. And I put that red bubble between the blue bubble here and this number 6. So right before pre-contemplation, I would put stuck. But what happens in pre-contemplation is basically what we might call seed planting. It's helping people think about the possibility of change. When you heard Monica's story and you hear the reoccurrences and the coming back and the over and over, this is her going from stuck to pre-contemplation to contemplation to action and then back again. It is how we make change, all of us, whether you're an addict or whether you're just a plain human being. We don't change in a linear fashion unless you're amazing and I want to know you. But that's not how it works for me. And you can take any changed habit and you know that that's true. Someone gives you an idea. You know, you don't have to settle for the chronic pain that's going on in your left vertebrae. You don't have to. Have you considered? That is stuck pre-contemplation. So what happens at the Jesus Center is we really focus in on the contemplation, which is helping someone choose into change and start thinking that they're not a lost cause. They're not hopeless, that there is a possibility for a better life. And it's a very relational component to the stages of change. Determination or commitment is when you decide, I need a strategy to move forward. And that may not be a 5-year strategy. It might be, hey, do you think you could choose not to drink for one day? Do you think you could come here for breakfast and meet me for breakfast? That's building in little steps to resolve that, I don't think so, and move towards, yeah, I think I can change. And then determination is when they start to actually make that commitment. And they're starting to build new strategies. So when someone comes to Sabbath House, our shelter, they begin to say, I'm going to choose my physical health, that's usually the first stage, over living on the street where I'm at danger all the time. I'm going to choose to put myself and my child in front of my commitment to that, no offense, deadbeat guy who I've been hanging out with. And then action is really when you start to implement strategies. That's where you started to see where Monica went from, I'd like to get a job. And then she got this, like, something in her just changed. And I think it's the Holy Spirit that just starts to move and get her that sense. And then she had some people around her saying, you go, you can do this. And then she found success at work. And they kept promoting her. So they became part of her team. And that action turned into action again. And then she moved into what we call here maintenance. And really what the Jesus Center has always done well is that contemplation to action and starting into maintenance. And if you transfer that to service provision, you start to see where groups who are doing outreach or referrals, 211 is our referral service in the county, this Project Room Key, low barrier sheltering. This is all that pre-contemplative, get out of your stuck mode stuff. If you do outreach into the community and you take a sandwich into someone's encampment, you're planting seeds. You're saying, you know, the system can be trusted. They're not ready to come in, if you will, or come towards us, but we go to them. And then the Renewal Center, I just popped this in here, but this is where you're really going to start saying, yes, I'm going to change my life. And then there's lots of different kinds of sheltering. For some, they want to go in and they want to keep drinking, or they're still using their drugs. They need a low barrier shelter model. If they want to get that part of their life changed, they need to go into a sober environment where they can actually start being surrounded with tools to keep them from that addiction cycle. Once someone is through that sheltering part, then moving into transitional housing and eventually permanent housing is the route through. And there are different theories. There are some that go straight from an encampment into a permanent shelter or permanent housing. And that's awesome. That's what they call housing first. And that works for some, and there's some housing available for that. But for folks who are in this entrenched enmeshment of mental illness, trauma, and addiction that we discussed earlier, they need those surrounding services without all the encumbrances of a full responsibility of PG&E, internet costs, you know, dealing with your car and all those other things. So that a little bit more supportive environment is really helpful. This is also supposed to show you that there are a lot of agencies working in this, and this is not a Lone Ranger sport. I also wanted to share, there's a lot of hopelessness around homelessness, and I wanted just to give a quick slide to show how many awesome things are happening. We have seen the tourist shelter move to a 24/7 low barrier shelter ever since the fire. They also opened a family shelter. We've launched a mobile medical unit that's operative 5 days a week. It goes between Oroville and Chico every other week. I've already experienced, actually, one of my staff members' life was actually probably saved through the mobile medical. He was a diabetic living with no treatment for a year. And his numbers were so wild when he wandered in on a break into the mobile medical that the lady said, you should be in the doctor said you should be in a coma. So he immediately got a new diet, got on his medication, all in the mobile medical unit that was in our parking lot. Jamboree Housing is coming up from Irvine. They're buying our Park Avenue property and building 59 units of affordable housing. This is huge news for our community. The county has taken over and consolidated their work with homelessness and housing. And it's being led by one of the most competent county execs, Don Taylor. There was a lot of dysfunction in what's called the continuum of care, and their leadership has proven to be awesome. The other piece is Elijah House, and they are a medical provider who does wraparound services for mental health and recovery. And we're very likely going to be collaborating with them on the Renewal site. I will just say that one of the benefits, I suppose, of COVID, there are some weird benefits, is the kind of capacity and collaboration that we've seen. One of those programs I mentioned earlier, and I'll just clarify it. I see that Katie, I think that's a good idea, is to clarify Project Room Key. It's a statewide program to help the most vulnerable who are unhoused move into hotels during the pandemic shelter in place. And so it's being managed through the county, and it's a collaboration of multiple agencies who are providing the wraparound services for folks who have been moved into hotels. So we moved every person who was over 65 who was in a vulnerable location into the hotel program. And we also, they had a very strict rubric for determining vulnerability of other ages as well, people with chronic illness particularly, and anyone who had been exposed to the virus or was at risk of being exposed. And so we have 130 to 140 in that program just in Chico. And as I mentioned earlier, we're providing all the meals for that program, 3 meals a day. And what's really fun is that we've already seen 13 move out to permanent housing. And right now there's a project through the city to move the rest of the folks into some other shelter rather than just push them back into the street. Because what has happened even in the 6 weeks of the program is we're seeing an amazing, they just are all healthier. They're getting 3 meals a day. They're sleeping in a bed. They're getting a daily shower. Just that alone can change your ability to, again, get them to that pre-contemplative place to say, ooh, this feels good, and I want this long-term. So it's been a kind of a funny little opportunity out of a mess, but I'm really hopeful that we can see some fruit from it. I want to end on our Renewal Center. Our Renewal Center is an opportunity to move our headquarters and build a much more extensive, collaborative, shared way of serving folks. It's going to be on Fair Street. We just went into escrow last week where the Work Training Center is. They're going to be moving their headquarters, and we will take over their buildings on the east side and their property, which is almost 4.8 acres on the west side. So we'll relocate our shelter and really focus in on that area of trauma, mental health, and addiction recovery. We will no longer be a drop-in place. As we've seen those low barrier beds and services increase, we'll be focusing on stewarding our resources towards that next step of getting folks fully engaged in building their path to abundant life. Lots going there, and it's changing every day, but I will look forward to giving you guys an update as we move closer to building our site plan. which is our next step. We're raising money. Anyone interested in investing in this with us, the sooner we finish our fundraising, the sooner we can get on that site. We will be there in some shape or form, probably by the early 21, because Jamboree will be pulling our building down in April of 21. We'll be working with neighbors, working with the city, and yeah, so it's moving. It is, we've been chatting about it for 3 years, and now we are on fast track to getting it done. I'm just gonna finish this, and then if there's any questions at the end, Beth, we can just circle back. Some of the church leadership was involved in a conference we did in February called the Engaged Church. And what we're doing tonight is a part of a threefold deepening of our relationship with churches. I think we have done a good job at the Jesus Center for 40 years, working as an outpost of the church. But given the complexity and the numbers of folks who we will continue to serve, and the way we want to do it, which is privately without a lot of government money, we really want to see this be an all play with the churches. We just can't do this kind of work in programs alone. Buildings and programs, they do not build transformed lives. The Holy Spirit inside the people of God is what makes for people to change their lives. Those are those positive interruptions to people's trajectory. We get to do that. As clumsy as we are. I always say to people, I'm not a social worker, but I like people. So I kind of play the big sister with folks. I'm like, hey, so good to see you. Oh my gosh, you look so good today. Hey, how was your meal? I'm really not that good as a social worker, but I'm a nice person. So you don't have to have specialized skills. And this is a slide that basically, again, another verse that just talks about what does it look like to give of what our abundance is to those in need. And again, there's no one right way. And so I continue to want to release you to go deep in reflection. I wrote a reflection piece this morning. I shared it with Katie Toma. She's on this call. But I really, 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 really believe that one of you praying for the heart and the soul of one human is as much working for the care of the poor as what I do as the director of the Jesus Center. If one of you is educating a social worker or a policy maker, you are doing this work. If you are interrupting the trajectory of a child's life as a teacher, you are working with the poor. There is no one way. So I just want to encourage us all that there is a place for us in the heart of God. And it's really fun to be where I am sometimes because I get to help each of us find that place. What is that place for you to engage? Here's some options. You already did one. You took a class. We've talked about the church maybe adopting a house. You can make a donation either for operations or for a renewal center or both. We are going to be offering some volunteer training virtually this summer until we can really open the doors again to volunteers, so you can kind of tool up as your next step. We are encouraging those who love to weed to come out to the farm. We have a lot of social distancing out there. We have a new farm on Hagen Lane, which is awesome. Oh, Henry, I'm answering your question. And you could bring a small group out there. We took our whole staff out there. We took 20 people out there. We had a social distance lunch. We had activities. We weeded. We had a great time. So we can custom make something for you there. If you want to be a part of the farm and eat the bounty of the farm, you can join our CSA. That's Community Supported Agriculture. And you can just go on our website and you'll see the link to sign up for that. And our amazing Allie is our new farm manager. And she's awesome. So those are just some fun ways to get engaged, even now with the silly COVID stuff. So that's what I have. I'd love to hear any more questions. What I want you to know is we are here to train. We are here to guide. We are here to call when you're just exasperated, whatever that word is, Tim. The one when you're just so frustrated because someone just said they're worthless people and you don't know what to say next. I'd love to talk through that stuff with you guys. So appreciate your interest. I can't believe you have 50 people and they're still on the call, Beth. It's so cool.
Thank you. There was one question that said basically, what's your recommendation that we do when we see, for example, people at the supermarket with a sign?
Yeah, so in terms of that, again, this is your guilt-free invitation to donate money. If you give, and I've done this for years, give money to the Jesus Center. So when you see somebody, you say, you know, I support meals at the Jesus Center, and you can go there, or I support beds at the Jesus Center. So why don't you call them and see how you can get plugged in? And giving someone cash is not a great option. It just isn't. And that would include your daughter and your son probably. But if they ask for something specific, hey, I'm really hungry and I really love a burger, and you have the time, or you're in a position where you could go into the store and get something that they could heat up, then that's a much better option than giving them cash. But again, that food that you bring to them then is an invitation to find out their name and ask them one curious question. Where are you from? Tell me a little bit of your story. Tell me about your dog. Tell me about your whatever it is. That might be something like you would if you met a new person. I see Ray is suggesting a gift card. Gift cards can be good. Just keep in mind that some gift cards are better than others. And because some can get converted into cash and some can get converted or be paid, you can pay for alcohol with them. So it's really just finding the right ones. I think Taco Bell and some of the fast food, you can't convert them to cash. Yes, bus passes are brilliant gifts. Yes. Bottles of water. I'm not a fan of single-use bottles for water, except for this purpose. I think this is a good use. They're always dehydrated, no matter what time of year it is. I think that Henry, all these pastors, you guys all came. It's so fun. I feel so honored on a Sunday night. The farm is absolutely inclusive of families. We love having families at the farm. I still remember one small group that came. I think it might have been one of Beth's kids. It was doing something with a machete. It was for, yes, we do. We have fun at the farm. We also really need some help in our warehouse sorting clothes. And if you're brave and want to put on gloves and a mask, we are inundated with clothes right now and no one to sort them. And we do have limited opportunities in the kitchen right now to pack to-go food. So if that's of interest and you're willing to join us, we aren't saying no. It's really up to you to decide whether that's something you want to do.
Hey, Laura.
Yeah, go ahead. Hi, Dan. Hi, Janice.
You mentioned the justice system earlier, and so I have two questions. One
Yes.
what kind of relationship do you have with specifically the Chico Police Department?
Mm.
And then secondly, as the Renewal Center gets established, are there other organizations that will provide the drop-in meal service?
So we have a really good relationship with the police department, fortunately. Actually, all the providers do. We really have a great police department when it comes to this population. So I can't say enough about our police department, to be honest. That's not always been the case, but it absolutely is now. And Mike O'Brien is our chief. He was on the Jesus Center board for 7 or 8 years. I mean, he's got a real heart for this population. When it comes to drop-in meals, that's still to be determined. But I will tell you that our numbers have diminished in the drop-in program as people have spread out through town more. And so someone's not going to walk 4 miles. For even our meals have gotten actually really, really good. We have a new cook. But even for that, they're not going to come. And with the tourist shelter and Safe Space, when Safe Space is open, providing meals, that has brought our numbers down. And we really see the better option is, and something that I'm spending a lot of behind the scenes time on, is pushing into a countywide or at least a citywide outreach program. Food going out to the encampments is a much better strategy than drawing people in and all they want is food. because when they go out into the campments, they take medical interventions, they take other services that they might need. They might be able to help because they go out with the police or with behavioral health, tying them into other services and linkages back into the community. And it's much more concerted and much more targeted to those. And it's relationship building, and they basically then bring in those who are ready to take next steps. It is it's a very difficult thing to let go. As you know, Dan, the Jesus Center was formed on providing those drop-in meals, but I feel really strongly that it's not the best program for moving more people forward in their lives. And we still have probably the biggest pain in my life right now is watching some of these folks come to meals every day for 10, 15 years. Katie will attest to this. She'll show up and she's like, "You're still here?" And that is not a service that I think we're about. We're in the changing life business. And more people will be eating because we'll be serving more people, but we'll just be doing it in a different way. And one of the sort of the silver linings of COVID is we have now proven that we can make 650 meals in one day all to go. So if anyone doubted our capacity, it's no longer true. So. Katie's adding her 2 cents in the chat. Well, thanks.
I'm grateful for other people here to chime in with their expertise. Do we have other questions? Do you want to unshare your screen, Laura, and we can see everyone's faces?
Yay.
Hi, everyone.
How fun. Take a picture.
So if you have any other questions right now, feel free to chime in, or you can chat me.
Hey, cooks.
Once we're able to gather and volunteer again as groups, we will. We're providing opportunities to serve Sunday breakfast. You can reach out to me if you're interested in that. And also Henry and our mission committee has talked about wanting to organize a Saturday family work day at the farm. We did that a few times in the past. And so, but again, I posted the link to, you can just click on the volunteer button at the Jesus Center if you'd like to volunteer there as well.
Thanks, you guys, for coming out. It was really fun to be with you all. You all make me happy. I love your faces.
Thanks so much, Laura. Appreciate you. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, we so appreciate Laura and her expertise and hard work. Certainly her heart.
Yeah.
Thanks, friends. Have a great week.
Okay,
Thank you, Laura.
You're free to sign off or whatever. Hang out for a little longer. Lots of love, Laura.
Yeah, fill me up. It's filling me up.
Lots of fans.
Well, your fan base is getting smaller, Laura.
Okay. There's only so much you can take in. You know? I don't know what Barbara's doing with her car.
Hey, good job with 1 hour too.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were on a tight ship, Laura. That was impressive.
That's right. Done a few of these before, Henry.
I know.
Sung happy birthday. I take it you have one this year.
Me?
Oh, it's good to see you guys.
Is it your birthday today, Henry?
No, sure.
No, hey, Dan.
Do you have a present for me?
No, I have no present for you, but
It's not actually. No, it's not my birthday.
Hi, Cookies. Hi, Terry. So smiley. I love your face.
Great to see you.
I guess we can stop recording now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you should always